today's mindful moment, packed with insights but designed to fit into your busy life. Ever feel like the world's like pushing us toward, like constant breakneck progress, but maybe we're losing something essential along the way?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
Today's deep dive, well, it takes us into The Conservative Mind
Okay.
by Russell Kirk,
Right.
a book exploring conservative thought across centuries.
Yeah.
We're not talking about partisan politics here,
No.
but a deep dive into ideas
Uh-huh.
about human nature,
Yeah.
society,
Sure.
and what makes for a truly good life.
What's fascinating is that Kirk doesn't present a rigid ideology,
Right.
but rather like a conversation across time.
Oh, interesting.
He starts with Edmund Burke,
Okay.
often called the father of modern conservatism,
Yeah.
and shows how Burke's ideas resonate even centuries later.
Burke is all about tradition, right?
Yes.
But isn't clinging to the past the opposite of progress?
Right.
Help me square that circle.
Well, Burke believed change is inevitable,
Okay.
but it should be like tending a garden, careful pruning rather than uprooting everything.
I see.
He saw revolutions not as progress, but as potential destroyers of the delicate balance of society.
Wow.
He was deeply suspicious of abstract ideals,
Okay.
arguing that real-world consequences are what matter.
So a bit less tear it all down, more let's build on what's working.
Exactly. Burke believed we're bound to past generations and future ones.
Yeah.
It's less about blind worship of the past
Okay.
and more about recognizing accumulated wisdom.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But how did these ideas cross the pond to America?
Kirk shows how early American thinkers like John Adams
Right.
were grappling with many of the same questions.
Yeah.
They were trying to build a new nation,
Sure.
but also saw the potential dangers of unchecked democracy
Okay.
and crass materialism.
So they weren't just starry-eyed revolutionaries.
That's
They were
right.
already worried about things going too far.
Adams, like Burke, believed in balancing individual liberty with social order.
Okay.
He feared that pure democracy could turn into mob rule
Oh, wow.
unless people had a strong sense of civic virtue
Right.
and understood the limits of human nature.
Yeah.
It's fascinating how some of their anxieties about instability
Yeah.
and the erosion of virtue resonate so strongly today.
It's like they were sending us a warning message through time.
Right.
But Kirk doesn't just focus on the big names, right?
That's right.
He introduces some lesser-known figures.
Yeah.
Who are also grappling with these ideas.
One who stands out is John Randolph of Roanoke,
Okay.
a fiery orator who was deeply skeptical of government power.
Interesting.
He believed passionately in individual liberty and states' rights,
Okay.
seeing the expansion of federal power as a threat to both.
Randolph was known for being quite blunt, wasn't he?
Oh, yeah.
Didn't he say something like, all men are born free and equal, I can never assent to because it is not true?
He did.
That's pretty bold.
Randolph wasn't denying equality under the law, but he was deeply suspicious of the idea that everyone is inherently equal in talents or character. He saw the attempt to force artificial equality as a recipe for tyranny
Okay.
and the stifling of individual excellence.
That's definitely a perspective you don't hear much these days.
Right.
And around the same time, we're starting to see the rise of a very different set of ideas of collectivism and socialism.
Yeah.
How does Kirk address that?
This is where Kirk's analysis gets really insightful.
Okay.
He traces the development of socialist thought, particularly as articulated by Marx,
Right.
and points out a central contradiction.
Okay.
To achieve equality, they argued,
Yeah.
you often need to establish inequality.
Huh.
Those in charge of redistributing wealth and power
Right.
become a new elite.
So the very act of trying to level the playing field
Yes.
can create a new kind of imbalance.
Precisely.
Wow.
And Kirk argues that this pursuit of equality
Yeah.
often comes at a steep price.
Okay.
Individual freedom. When the state takes on the role of engineering society, it inevitably assumes more and more control over people's lives.
Right.
This can stifle initiative,
Sure.
creativity,
Yeah.
the very dynamism that drives real progress.
So we're seeing a clear theme emerge here.
Yeah.
From Burke to Adams to Randolph, there's this consistent concern about the dangers of concentrated power and the importance of tradition and individual responsibility.
Exactly.
Okay.
And as we move further into the 19th and 20th centuries, these ideas will be tested and challenged by new social and political forces.
Right.
But this early foundation laid by these thinkers provides a framework for understanding the enduring appeal and relevance of conservative thought.
This is already giving me a whole new perspective on history.
Interesting.
It seems these anxieties about the loss of individual liberty and the erosion of community weren't just issues back then.
Right.
They're more relevant than ever.
Absolutely. And this is where Alexis de Tocqueville's observations become especially relevant.
Right. Tocqueville's Democracy in America is still considered like one of the most insightful analyses of American society.
Yes.
Even though it was written like almost 200 years ago.
I know.
But he wasn't just singing democracy's praises, was he?
No.
What did he see that worried him?
Tocqueville was amazed by America's energy and equality, but he also saw a potential dark side.
Oh.
He worried about what he called democratic despotism, a subtle form of tyranny that could arise not from a dictator, but from the erosion of the very things that make a free society work.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What exactly did he mean by democratic despotism?
Yeah.
It sounds almost like a contradiction in terms.
Tocqueville believed that the most dangerous threat to freedom wouldn't come from like jackbooted thugs, but from a gradual weakening of those institutions that stand between the individual and the state. Things like family, churches, local communities, voluntary associations. These act as buffers against the expanding power of government.
So it's not just about the size of government, but about the health of these smaller mediating structures.
Precisely.
Okay.
Tocqueville worried that as people became more isolated and focused on their own individual pursuits, they would become less connected to their communities and more dependent on the state for everything. This would make them vulnerable to manipulation and control.
Wow, that's kind of chilling when you think about how our society has evolved.
Yeah.
The decline of traditional families, the rise of social media, the increasing atomization of our lives. It's like Tocqueville predicted it all.
It really is.
And Kirk, building on Tocqueville's insights, argues that this isn't just a social or a political problem. It's a spiritual one.
Yes.
He sees a direct link between the decline of those mediating institutions and the rise of materialism and a sense of meaninglessness. So we're not just talking about political structures here, but about the very fabric of society and what gives life meaning.
Yeah.
That's a pretty big claim.
Kirk believed that true freedom requires more than just individual rights and a limited government. It requires a sense of community, a shared purpose, a connection to something larger than oneself. And these are things that can't be legislated or imposed from above.
So how do we combat this sense of atomization and meaninglessness? Where do we even begin?
That's a question that many thinkers have grappled with, and Kirk explores a variety of perspectives. One particularly fascinating figure is Cardinal Newman, who challenged the prevailing faith in reason and scientific progress that was so dominant in the 19th century.
I've heard of Newman, but to be honest, I'm not very familiar with his ideas. What was it about his thinking that Kirk found so compelling?
Newman argued that there's a form of knowledge, a kind of intuition, that goes beyond what we can observe and measure scientifically. He called it the Eliot sense.
An ability to grasp truths that can't be proven by logic alone.
So it's like a gut feeling, but one that's rooted in experience and a deeper understanding of human nature.
Exactly. Think about learning to ride a bike. No instruction manual can fully capture the experience. You learn through trial and error, through intuition, through a kind of embodied knowledge. Newman believed this Eliot sense was essential for understanding things like morality, beauty, and the human condition, things that science can't fully explain.
That makes a lot of sense. We're constantly bombarded with data and information. But it doesn't always help us make sense of the big questions, the things that really matter.
And this is where conservative thinkers drawing on figures like Newman offer a counterpoint to the often sterile worldview of materialism and scientism. They remind us that there's more to life than what we can see and measure. That there are truths that can only be grasped through experience.
A tradition and a sense of the transcendent.
This is really making me rethink my own assumptions about knowledge and progress.
Yeah.
It's like we've become so focused on accumulating data and mastering technology that we've lost sight of some fundamental human truths.
And this brings us to another insightful observer.
Okay.
W.B. Yeats, the Irish poet.
Okay.
He was writing in the early 20th century, but his words seem eerily prophetic today.
Oh.
He warned about a future where the pursuit of material comfort would lead to spiritual emptiness. A world devoid of beauty, imagination, and meaning.
That's a pretty bleak picture. But does it really have to be that way?
Well,
Are we doomed to a future of soulless consumerism?
Yeats wasn't simply pessimistic. He believed that art in its truest form had the power to awaken our imaginations, to connect us to something larger than ourselves, to remind us of those eternal truths that transcend the fleeting distractions of the material world.
So it's about finding those things that nourish the soul, that give life meaning and purpose beyond just acquiring stuff.
Exactly. And this is where conservative thinkers see a vital role for tradition, for those institutions and practices that have stood a test of time and have helped to cultivate virtue, beauty, and a sense of the sacred.
This is giving me a whole new appreciation for the power of art and culture.
Yeah.
It's not just entertainment. It's a way of connecting with something deeper, something that speaks to our humanity.
Absolutely.
And this recognition of the importance of culture is a key theme in 20th century conservative thought.
Yes.
Figures like Irving Babbitt, Paul Elmer More, and George Santayana, each in their own way, sought to revitalize conservative principles in a modern world.
Right.
So it's not about clinging to the past or rejecting progress, but about finding a way to integrate those timeless truths into a rapidly changing world.
Exactly. These thinkers understood that conservatism isn't about stagnation. It's about preserving what's best about our heritage while also adapting to new circumstances.
Right.
It's about finding that delicate balance between continuity and innovation, between tradition and progress.
That makes a lot of sense.
No?
It's not about living in the past. It's about learning from it.
Yes.
And applying those lessons to the challenges of today.
Right.
But we're living in a world that seems to be spinning faster and faster.
I know.
Technology is changing everything, and it's hard to even imagine what the future holds.
Yeah.
Can these conservative ideas really hold up in such a chaotic and unpredictable world?
That's a great question, and it's one that Robert Nisbet, a sociologist writing in the mid-20th century, addressed head-on.
Okay.
His work on the quest for community seems even more relevant today than when it was first published.
Okay, I've heard the phrase loss of community thrown around a lot, but what did Nisbet mean by it?
Nisbet argued that the erosion of those mediating structures, family, church, local associations, wasn't just a social problem. It was a fundamental threat to human flourishing.
Wow.
He believed that these institutions provided a sense of belonging, purpose, and responsibility that was essential for a healthy society.
So it's not just about feeling lonely, it's about losing those vital connections that give life meaning and structure.
Exactly.
Right.
And Nisbet saw this quest for community as a driving force behind many of the social and political upheavals of his time. He believed that when people feel atomized and alienated, they become vulnerable to extremist ideologies and totalitarian movements that promise to restore a sense of belonging and purpose, even if it comes at the cost of freedom.
That's a sobering thought. Are we seeing this play out today with the rise of populism and political polarization? Are people so desperate for connection that they're willing to sacrifice their freedom for a sense of belonging?
It's certainly a question worth considering.
Yeah.
And Nisbet's work offers a powerful reminder that building a truly free and flourishing society requires more than just individual rights and a limited government.
Right.
It requires a vibrant civil society, a network of strong and healthy institutions that can provide a sense of community and meaning.
So it's not just about protecting ourselves from government overreach.
Right.
It's about building those positive connections in our own lives and communities.
Yes.
That's a pretty empowering message, actually.
It is.
And that's what makes Kirk's exploration of conservative thought so compelling.
Yeah.
It's not just a critique of modern society. It's a call to action, an invitation to rediscover those timeless principles and practices that can help us build a better future.
Absolutely.
This has been an incredible journey through some truly mind-bending ideas.
Right.
From Burke's emphasis on tradition to Tocqueville's warnings about democratic despotism to Newman's concept of the Eliot sense. to Nisbet's analysis of
Right.
the quest for community. We've covered a lot of ground. I'm starting to see the world in a whole new light. So we've explored this like rich history of conservative thought, but it's not just an intellectual exercise, is it?
Right.
What does it all mean for us today?
Yeah.
How can we apply these ideas to like our own lives and the challenges we're facing?
That's the key question.
Yeah.
And Kirk doesn't offer simple solutions.
Right?
He understood that renewing a society, rebuilding a culture,
Mm-hmm.
takes time and sustained effort.
Right.
It's not about waiting for a political savior,
Okay.
but about each of us taking responsibility for our own little corner of the world.
So it's less about like grand pronouncements and sweeping policies,
Yeah.
more about focusing on what we can actually influence.
Right.
Our families, our communities,
Yeah.
the institutions we're a part of.
Exactly.
Right.
Kirk believed real change starts from the ground up.
Right.
It's about reviving civic engagement,
Okay.
supporting local businesses,
Oh, no.
participating in religious or charitable organizations,
Mhm.
those things that build social fabric.
Right.
It's about being a good neighbor,
Yeah.
a responsible citizen.
That sounds almost old-fashioned, doesn't it?
Yeah.
In our age of global,
Yeah.
everything. It's
Oh.
easy to feel like focusing on our immediate surroundings is, well, kind of insignificant.
It may seem counterintuitive,
Yeah.
but those small local actions
Uh-huh.
are the building blocks of a healthy society.
Okay.
It's in those face-to-face interactions,
Yeah.
those shared experiences,
Yeah.
that we rediscover a sense of belonging, purpose, and responsibility.
Wow.
It's where we learn to live out those values that conservative thinkers have championed for centuries.
You know, it's funny. We often think of conservatism as being about, like, resisting change.
Yeah.
But Kirk seems to be arguing that it's actually about embracing a certain kind of change.
That's a great observation.
Yeah.
It's not about clinging to the past,
Right.
but about understanding what's truly valuable and worth preserving. It's about finding ways to adapt those principles to the challenges of a new era.
So it's a kind of radical commitment to the
Yeah.
things that really matter.
Yes.
Family, community, faith, virtue.
Mm-hmm.
Those are things that often get lost in the rush of modern life.
Precisely.
Okay.
And what's encouraging is that Kirk didn't see this as a hopeless cause.
Okay.
He pointed to the resurgence of conservative thought in his own time
Right.
as evidence that people were beginning to recognize the shortcomings of a purely materialist, individualistic worldview.
So there's hope.
Yeah.
We're not just doomed to drift further and further apart into this sea of meaninglessness.
Kirk believed that we have the capacity to turn things around,
Okay.
but it requires a conscious effort, a willingness to challenge the prevailing assumptions of our age.
Right.
It's about rediscovering the wisdom of those who came before us
Yeah.
and applying it to the challenges we face today.
Well, I have to say this has been a truly eye-opening deep dive.
It has.
It's challenged my own assumptions about progress and what it means to live a good life. You know,
Yeah.
it's given me a new appreciation for the power of tradition and community,
Mm-hmm.
things I think we've taken for granted for far too long.
And that's the beauty of Kirk's The Conservative Mind.
Right.
It's not just a political treatise.
Hmm.
It's an invitation to think deeply about the human condition, about what makes for a truly just and flourishing society.
If you're at all intrigued by these ideas, I highly recommend picking up a copy of the book.
Yeah,
It's a dense read,
it is.
but it's one of those books that can really change the way you see the world.
Absolutely.
And as you delve into Kirk's work, we encourage you to ask yourself, what resonates most deeply with you?
Yeah.
What insights can you apply to your own life, your community, your understanding of the world?
It's a good question.
As we wrap up this deep dive, we'd like to leave you with a final thought to ponder.
Okay.
In our pursuit of progress, are we losing sight of those essential truths about human nature and the things that truly make for a good life? Are we sacrificing community meaning and connection on the altar of individual ambition and material success?
Wow.
We encourage you to contemplate these questions and join us next time for another deep dive into the world of ideas. And don't forget to subscribe to The Deep Dive and share this episode with your friends. Until next time, keep diving. So if you haven't already,
Pick up a copy
we have a link in the show notes.
and tell us what you think.